Welcome to the video on converting between vertex and standard form of an equation. If you don't have them fresh in your mind, you should take a moment to remember what vertex and standard form are. In particular, you'll remember that vertex form is the one where you have one set of parentheses, and we call it a times x minus h squared plus k. And standard form is where there are no parentheses. In other words, it's a x squared plus bx plus c. We'll start with the easier direction, which is if you're starting in vertex form. And basically the idea is if I want to get to standard form, I just need to get rid of those parentheses somehow. And there's no trick to it. You just use your basic knowledge of algebra. This squared symbol that's outside of the parentheses means that this set of parentheses is being multiplied times itself. And to get rid of the parentheses, we can just multiply that out. So the first step will be to take the binomial inside parentheses, and I'll write it 2 times so that I can see how to square it. And we'll get the function -2 times x plus 1 times x plus 1 plus 6. And then I'm going to FOIL out these 2 sets of parentheses. You might wonder about this -2, and if you thought you were going to distribute it, that wasn't a wrong thought. You are welcome to distribute. However, you do need to be careful that if you're going to distribute, you only distribute to one binomial. If you try to distribute to both, you will end up with a wrong answer, which is why I would prefer to multiply the 2 binomials first. When you do this, please remember to do all 4 multiplications in FOIL. Don't accidentally skip the middle terms because they're going to be important. X times x will be x squared. And then we'll get plus x, or 1x if you like, and then another plus x, and plus 1. When you FOIL this out, you should keep the whole thing in parentheses because that -2 is going to come down, as is the plus 6 at the back. Next, I'll combine my like terms inside, and then I'm going to go ahead and distribute. And when you distribute, make sure that you're multiplying the -2 to all 3 pieces that are inside parentheses, but don't multiply it by the number at the back because it's not in parentheses. When I FOIL inside, I end up with -2x squared minus 4x minus 2, and then plus 6 at the end. Last step is just to combine like terms, and our final answer in standard form is the function f of x equals -2x squared minus 4x plus positive 4. If you need a minute to look at this, you should pause the video here. Otherwise, here are 2 practice problems for you. Take a moment to convert each of these functions to standard form. Remember that a negative outside parentheses is the same thing as a -1. And when you've completed these conversions, press play again to take a look at the answers. Here are the answers. If you need another moment to check your work, press pause. Otherwise, on the next page, there are 2 more practice problems for you, and they look like this. Take a moment to convert each of these functions to standard form. Press pause while you do so, and then when you press play again, I'll show you the answers. Here are the answers for the second 2 practice problems. Take a moment to pause the video so that you can check your work. In particular, remember that multiplying times 1/2 is the same thing as dividing by 2. And if you're ready to move on, we're going to take a look at the opposite direction. So in these examples, we've been converting from vertex form with parentheses into standard form without parentheses. The next example that we'll do is the opposite. We start in standard form, and focusing really on what it means to get a vertex form equation, you might want to just write the formula out at the end. It's a nice first step because it gives you something solid to work with. And in case you ever forget how to do this, looking at this formula might jog your memory. Because in order to write an equation that looks like this, you need to know what h and k are. And we don't know that right now because 3 and 12 and 10, those don't tell you h and k. Those tell you a and b and c because this is in standard form. So if I know A, B, and C, and I want to know H, little bell should go off in your head because we have a formula for that. The formula is H equals negative B over 2A. And by plugging into this formula, it's going to allow me to figure out what these numbers are, which will allow me to write the final equation. To calculate H, we get negative 12 over 2 times 3. Which becomes negative 12 over 6, which is negative 2. Next, to find k, I'm going to take that h value and I'll plug it back into the original equation. And we get k equals 3 times negative 2 squared plus 12 times negative 2 plus 10. Be careful with your order of operations at this stage. Make sure that you don't multiply first. Exponents are first, and negative 2 squared is positive 4. Positive 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. And then simplifying from left to right, 12 minus 24 is negative 12. And negative 12 plus 10 is negative 2. Now that I know h and k, I have most of what I need to write my final formula. The only other thing I need to know is a, and the good news is that a is actually the same a value from standard form, which was 3. So my final answer, this function in vertex form, is f of x equals 3 times x, and remember that minus h flips that sign, so it's actually going to be x plus 2 squared, and then minus 2 for that k value. Take a moment to make sure that you have this example to refer to, and then we'll do some practice problems. Here are a couple for you. Pause the video here to work these out, and then when you press play again, we'll take a look at the answers. I'm going to try and zoom in for you. Hopefully this works. There's the first one that you just worked out. And here's the second one. And let's look at 2 last practice problems. Press pause while you work this out, and then I'll show you the answer. Here you go. And your final practice problem. And here are the answers.